right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. In this one, I wanted to talk, of course, about some Aaron Rodgers, not necessarily news, but just rumors. We actually both just wrapped up watching the Pat McAfee show where Aaron Rodgers was a guest, and he was on there for a good I want to say like 20 minutes to a half hour. Didn't really get that definite answer. Wasn't really expecting one either with A-Rod, but I wanted to bring on my buddy Bosterowski Productions. What's going on, man?
How's it going, Ian? Thanks for having me. Yeah, man, we're going through a wild scenario. I mean, we've done it the past 2 years as Packers fans where it's like, oh, is Aaron Rodgers going to leave? Is he going to stay? We keep going through the same thing, but there's a lot of smoke, and where there's smoke, there's fire. So I think, a potential Aaron Rodgers trade could be on the horizon.
It's interesting because, we I feel like we kind of hear this every offseason, like what's going on with his future. Is he going to retire? Is he going to, continue to play for Green Bay, possibly a new team? I understand all three avenues, from Rodgers' perspective, because he is up there in age and he can still play. And obviously the money is a factor, with the guarantees and everything like that.
Yep.
It's a tough decision. Honestly, it's not just, an easy route is not on the table. I think it's a decision that takes time, obviously, but, you're a guy that's watched, I want to say, every single snap of Rodgers' career. What do you, and how, because you've been through this, right? You've seen the interviews, you've seen the press conferences throughout the years. What do you, in your heart of hearts, think is actually going to happen here?
Man, I'm very conflicted as a Packers fan because like 2 weeks ago, I'm like, okay, bring back Aaron Rodgers. Definitely another shot at a Super Bowl run. That's the route they need to go. And the more I sit here and break down salary cap situations and what it could do for the Packers or what it will do for the Packers in the future, I'm like, is it time? Is it time to finally pull that trigger? They already kind of did that drafting Jordan Love a few years ago. They kind of already set that pathway up. Now, obviously, if Jordan Love isn't good, you put yourself into a losing, team for a few years there. And then, with Aaron Rodgers, you have a shot every year, so to speak. Packers went 8-9 this year. They didn't have a shot, but so to speak, with Aaron Rodgers playing at the level you expect from Aaron Rodgers, you have a shot every year. But I'm very conflicted.
So, yeah, I mean, you just pretty much talked a little bit about the cap. Everybody knows that he's supposedly guaranteed to make the $60 million, but we've heard the term before, the cap is fake, and you could add void years and stuff like that to to players' contracts and really kick the can down the road. At some point, teams are going to have to pay the piper, but as far as the short term goes, it's not like it's 100% guaranteed that it's going to be a $60 million cap hit, but pretty much all the details, all the information on the cap Rodgers situation, given the current structure. Can you kind of dive into the detail on that?
Yeah, it's confusing. I mean, you can look at different reports and different websites, and some will say, "Oh, if they trade Rodgers, there'll be a $99 million cap hit." That's not the case.
Yeah.
What Aaron Rodgers has in his deal is an option bonus that the Packers can either accept or deny. Obviously, they would accept it if he stays, and they wouldn't obviously accept it if he were to be traded. So some people are saying that if the team were to trade for him, he would be a $40 million cap hit. That's not the case. Actually, if a team were to trade him, he'd be pretty cheap for 2023, the $15.79 million cap hit. I'd say that's a pretty good deal for someone like Aaron Rodgers on a team with a lot of young talent, a nice defensive coach in Robert Saleh. So then it comes into play in 2024. It jumps up to 32.5 in 2025, a 51.1, and 2026, a $45.3 million cap hit. But obviously, like you said, you can always add void years. You can restructure things. Would Aaron Rodgers even play into 2026? Highly doubt it. He'd likely play this year, maybe next, and then retire. That's my best guess. But the salary cap for the Packers in terms of trading Aaron Rodgers, it's not that bad either. They have two routes they could go. They could do a pre-June 1st trade, which would mean, trading pre-June 1st to the New York Jets, which makes the most sense because although it gives them a $40 million cap hit on the books this year, which is $9 million more than what they're going to pay him anyways, it then erases anything in the future. So then the Packers are setting themselves up to have a lot of money in the future to surround Jordan Love with talent. If they were to do a post-June 1st designation, it pretty much splits it from 2023 and 2024. But the bottom line is, if the Jets wanted to do this, they could have a four-time MVP quarterback on their team for Aaron Rodgers for this year at $15.79 million cap hit.
Yeah, and that's just insane to think about. By the way, that would be pre June 1st or post? It would
Yes.
be
Either way, because then the Jets would accept his option. If they weren't to accept his option, which would make no sense, his cap hit would jump to that $60 million mark. It would make absolutely no sense.
got you, got you. And you know, it's interesting because we look at the New York Jets. They're a desperate team right now when we're looking specifically at the quarterback position. There's pressure on Salah to make the playoffs. There's pressure on Joe Douglas to, you know, fix the quarterback position because it's not like he's in year 1 or year 2 of being the general manager of the team. You know, it's been a couple seasons now and there's still a massive question mark holding the team back. It leads me to believe that the Jets will be more aggressive in the pursuit of trying to, you know, acquire a guy in Rodgers. But I think the big question here, because Woody Johnson, the owner, already came out and said, hey, you know, I'll pay whatever it takes and all that stuff. And Joe Douglas really, really likes Rodgers. But I think the big question is the timetable. Because the Jets are so desperate, do they have the luxury of waiting around for Rodgers to make his decision? And, you know, again, we were watching before on the McAfee show. It doesn't sound like he's in any rush to make his mind up. It doesn't really sound like he has a plan. It sounds like he's completely open to sticking with the Packers, which is totally fine. But you look at the you put yourself in the Jets' perspective, and it's like they have to figure this out now. And if there's a chance that Rodgers retires, you know, sticks with Green Bay, gets traded to whoever, New England, Las Vegas, I know Tennessee's being thrown around as well. No NFC teams. That was actually reported today, and obviously makes sense. You know, do they have the time to wait around? You know, if Rodgers gets dealt to the Raiders and the Jets are waiting around until the summer to make a move, you're out of luck. You know, like free agency's in March. Derek Carr, like what's going on with that? Jimmy Garoppolo, like I mean, I know at this point the Lamar Jackson stuff is pretty much I don't want to say completely dead because the ink is not on the paper and we've seen crazy stuff happen before, but there are many options with the quarterback position. But I think time right now for the Jets is the biggest hurdle to cross.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then you look into, you know, what would the compensation be? Because if we look into last year, if the Packers were to trade him, which would have made more sense, look in hindsight's 2020, right? But if you were to look last year, it's like you're guaranteed getting multiple first round picks for Aaron Rodgers. Now, what would that be this year? Because you kind of have, like you said, the uncertainty of Aaron Rodgers. He seems like he's in no rush. Does he want to retire? Does he want to play? Obviously, if a trade were to happen, it would be mutual. Aaron Rodgers would have to agree to that. Okay, do I want to go play in New York with Salah? And do they hire Hackett, a guy he has a relationship with, based on that? We don't know. But what would the compensation be in your eyes? What do you think the Jets would be willing to give up? I think it would have to include multiple conditional picks, possibly. Like, okay, if Aaron Rodgers plays in 2023, you're trading into the Jets. A conditional pick could be included if he returns in 2024. What do you think Woody Johnson and the Jets in general would be willing to give up?
I don't mean to say this like like I know it could kind of come off as like a little bit of a joke, but I think literally anything at this point. We've seen
Good to hear.
We've seen the struggles that the Jets have had at the quarterback position. They continue to cycle through these young quarterbacks, and it's just not working. They just cannot develop these guys. Whether it's on the quarterback just themselves, they're not capable, or it's on the team for failing to put these guys in a position to have success and again develop them for the long term. It's 100% clear that the Jets want a veteran option, somebody who's had, you know, a lot of success before. Again, whether that's a Jimmy G, a Carr, a Rodgers, a Lamar Jackson. And we've seen Joe Douglas try to land these big name players, whether it's Deshaun Watson before the allegations, Tyreek Hill. There's been players that the Jets have been linked to. Joe Douglas supposedly has a lot of interest in, but they just never really work out, or they're coming up short just by a hair. With Rodgers, though, Green Bay is in a position to where I'm looking at Green Bay. I think if they want to move off of Rodgers, it makes total sense because you have your guy in Jordan Love, as you know, in place. You now have the ability to free up some money financially. You kind of get rid of the drama a little bit. As much as I love Rodgers, there's this cloud of stories and rumors surrounding Green Bay every single offseason, which, I could imagine gets a little annoying, right?
It does. It does. It definitely does.
And then on top of that, like, you get a nice haul back in return. So it's like now you're accelerating the rebuilding process for Green Bay to the point where it's like, I don't even know if it is a rebuild. It's more so just like we're just influxing talent into the roster, whether that's through young players that they would be getting or draft picks or maybe even both.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from Green Bay's perspective, to me, it makes sense to move off of Rodgers. I think the report right now that's being floated around is 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you'd feel about that.
I think that's a lot. I would love that if the Jets were to go, hey, here's 2 first-round picks. I'd say you go ahead and agree to that deal. I think, like I said, one of them would probably be conditional. I actually just did a mock draft on my own, and one of the players I was looking at that could be included in a trade, I want to hear your thoughts on this, is Elijah Moore. We saw this last season in trying to request a trade. I think that was due to Mike LaFleur. Would he want to go play with another LaFleur? Who knows? Who knows?
Good point.
But the Packers, if they were to move on from Aaron Rodgers, they're likely not going to bring back Randall Cobb, and I feel like Elijah Moore could fit well in that Packers offense. Jordan Love is a slot receiver, so they could also add maybe someone like him. But I want to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Look, I mean, if I was Joe Douglas and Matt LaFleur picked up the phone and said, hey, man, like, we'll give you now real quick. Let me ask you, are you talking 2 first-round picks and Elijah Moore, or 1?
No. 1 and maybe like a second next year. I don't know. Like I said, we're all speculating at this point. We don't even know the true value or what teams are offering. We're just hearing a lot of smoke. But
yeah,
like you said, you do think the Jets would go in and be like, okay, what do you want? And we'll work off of that.
I mean, I would be open to moving more for sure. Like, if that's what it takes to go get Aaron Rodgers of all players in the NFL, we're talking Aaron Rodgers could become the next Jets quarterback, and it's going to take a first-round pick, which is an unproven player at the end of the day, and Elijah Moore, who has a tremendously high upside. We've seen flashes of Moore. Like, I think he could be a really, really good player, especially with Rodgers. I think he could really thrive. But you look at the Jets wide receiving core right now. They have Wilson under contract, Corey Davis under contract, might get cut, but still under contract. Berrios under contract, and of course, free agency and the draft. I know we're talking first and second round pick, but you could go land a guy in the third, fourth round that can easily start for you. Or maybe Randall Cobb becomes a Jet. You never know at that point.
That might be a thing, because when Aaron Rodgers returned 2 years ago, or pretty much came back, it was like, okay, you need to go and trade Randall Cobb. I don't think by any means Gutekunst wanted to do that. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think that was all Aaron Rodgers. So maybe that would be a contingency where it's like, okay, I'll play for you, but you got to bring in Randall Cobb, Mason Crosby, Mercedes Lewis. It's like, all right, at that point.
Dude, it's crazy how much like Rodgers, like, you could just tell the guys that he's tight with, like Jordy Nelson and stuff throughout the years. Like, I do like that about Rodgers. It always kind of seems like he has his guys back, whether they're on Green Bay or out of the league or on, other teams. But no, to answer your question, I would definitely involve more in a trade. Now, if we're talking 2 first-round picks, Elijah Moore, and maybe like a middle round pick, that's a pretty big deal. But again, the Jets are desperate. Like, what do you? If Rodgers is looking at, or if Green Bay's looking at Joe Douglas, like right in the face and saying, like, Rodgers could be yours, you just have to throw in Elijah Moore. I think at that point, knowing that this could be his last year to make the playoffs, it's like, yeah, you might pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, because I do think the Jets are generally a quarterback away. I mean, we saw the start they had to this season, and that's even with like Joe Flacco playing a quarterback.
Right.
So I think if they were to add someone like Aaron Rodgers, where you already have a head coach that's defensive minded, and I feel like that tailors to Rodgers more. And then if you were to bring in Hackett, like you said, they interviewed him. Obviously, they didn't work out too well for the Broncos, but if they had Rodgers in place beforehand, I think that would benefit the Jets a lot. Now, obviously, then you go down the argument of like, what would that entail? What would the draft capital be, and would that set yourself up for poor talent or poor team in the future? But if it's a chance at a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, you probably do it.
Yeah, so financially it's realistic. From a compensation standpoint, it's realistic. From just an overall team fit, especially if the Jets land, Rodgers, Guy, and Hackett. I don't know, like, I know those guys are tight. I know there was a lot of red zone success with those two, and Hackett had a lot of responsibility in that department. And then also once Hackett left, the red zone offense kind of
Oh yeah.
took a hit.
Yeah.
If you could just quickly elaborate on because Hackett right now, let's be honest, is just a joke. From the mess in Denver, it seems like everywhere you turn, whether it's like you're talking to your buddies, you're watching like national sports media, online, it's like Hackett, you just got to stay away from him. Couldn't make it work with Russell Wilson, stay away. But what's your experience with Hackett?
So I feel like if you ask anyone that's not a Packers fan, they'll say what you just said. But I feel like the general consensus here in Green Bay is that everyone's like, I'd take Hackett back. OC. I mean,
Yeah.
Adam Stenavich was promoted to OC this year. He's a great offensive line coach. And then the offense, of course, you lose Devontae Adams. That's a lot of part of it, right? But there's other things that changed. I feel like the offensive play calling in the red zone was subpar. Aaron Jones was very little used in the red zone, whereas past years, the dude had like 20 touchdowns and most of them came in the red zone. He had, I think, a couple touchdowns in the red zone this year, if that. So the underutilization of Aaron Jones, I think, hurt the Packers offense. And I just think in general, and Nathaniel Hackett called it the gold zone. That was, within the 20 yards of the end zone. And the Packers succeeded exceptionally in the gold zone under Nathaniel Hackett. So I think I would open him back or welcome him back with open arms. And I think if the Jets were to trade for Rodgers, they should too.
Dude, that's it's kind of relieving, hearing you talk, hearing somebody talk highly of Hackett, because right now the two front runners for the Jets OC job, Darrell Bevell and Nathaniel Hackett. Darrell Bevell declined the interview, so it's looking like it's going to probably Hackett. I don't want to say it is, but I would say right now, like if you're comparing him to maybe a guy like Marcus Brady, or like a Greg Olson or a Greg Roman, it just doesn't seem like there's much smoke with any other candidate outside of Hackett and a couple of coaches on the Eagles staff, Patullo and Brian Johnson. But dude, I appreciate you stopping on, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me in. Always a pleasure to talk Packers, Jets, and of course Aaron Rodgers every offseason.
Yeah, man. And if Rodgers actually gets traded to the Jets, feel free to hop back on anytime.
Of course. Appreciate you, man.